Hey, it's ODB, the Lincoln Addict, back with another review. What I want to do is jump right in because we're in the midst of this bid that has jumped up substantially within the last hour or so. So I'll say from 3:30 Eastern to about 4:30 now Eastern time. You're going to see on the screen this 27-year owned 65 Lincoln Continental convertible that I wanted to do a listing review prior to now. I just have not had the time. And what I want to do is we're going to go through this together, but you're going to be able to see it in real time. I think it's the first time that I'll have one of these recordings in real time as the auction is ending. There's 99 comments. What I want to do is we're going to possibly, you may hear it too, we're going to hear a beep if the bidding continues, but you can see right now it's at 153,000. In the last 10 minutes or so, it's bounced about 10K, give or take. But an hour ago, it was just at about 102,000. So it kind of gives you an example there of how far it's went up. Now, I want to talk about why this car is going for this amount and should it be going for more? Now, if you're a return viewer, thank you so much. What I want to reinforce is for 65, we know if we look at my chart that I created, there's 3,356 convertibles for that model year. And that was an increase of about 50 over the previous years. 64, 65, pretty much sales were flat year over year, if that makes sense. Now, I just pulled this. I'm a Haggerty customer. What I'll reinforce is, again, you can see a concourse condition. This car has exceeded that 131,000 as it should. And we'll talk why when we look at it here in just a moment. But you can see the range there was a $100,000 swing between fair and number one concourse. The serial number, as always, is listed on the Bring a Trailer auction. I've copied it there. We can see we're looking at a 65 convertible that's black. The VIN plate here, we can reinforce that if we look at the VIN, number 5 stands for the 5 for 65. It was built at Wixom, of course. 86 is a convertible. The letter N, like Nancy, is pretty standard. That's the Mel 430. And we can see those last digits there, those last 6 digits, basically correlate. The 4 is always there. And then you have 6 digits preceding that, or 5, excuse me. And that is going to be the 36,912 built for that model year. And for that model year, including limos, it was about 40,000. So that kind of tells us it's the end of the run. Now, I am going to jump over here real quick to kind of see where we're at. And this one did end at 1,000. So the bid kept kind of bouncing there a little bit. And I wanted to see if it was going to end. But again, we are going to talk about why that car sold for that much. Now, and also why it should have, in my opinion, went for more. But with that number, 36,912, again, that indicates it's at the tail end of that production. The 36,000 out of 40, obviously at the end of it there. Bring a Trailer does a great job. So what I've done is I've just copied and pasted into this white box, essentially this, the VIN plate. And we can see this VIN plate looks amazing. Now, someone in the comments had mentioned, was this a reproduced VIN plate? Looking at it, you almost want to say, yeah, like maybe it was the original VIN plate and it was redetailed, because there are folks that do those kind of things. But certainly you wouldn't really know unless they answer that question. The key thing that stands out here is the DSO. So I've talked about this, the district sales office, or destination sales office, if you will. Being that it's a 5-2, that indicates Los Angeles ordering district. Why is that key? We've talked about those warmer climates, the Arizonas, the Californias of the world. If this car remained in or around that area for its entire existence, certainly that's a great thing, because you're not up in like a Michigan state, Maine, New York. Nothing against those states. However, we all know that if you're driving in those harsher conditions and the salt on the roads and things like that, that deteriorates these cars, or any car rather, much more. But everything is pretty standard there. It's black, and it also has the Palomino leather upholstery, which I think is amazing. It's beautiful. You don't see it as much. And we'll look at that, of course, here in an example in just a moment. Now, I should have taken off this example only, so my apologies. I kind of put this together quickly. I just got home from the day job. And what we can see here is the 13E. If we look at my chart, we know E represents May. 13th is the day of the month. So it would have been May 13th of 1965 for the 65 model year. Remember, that production ran, give or take, from, I've read August 3rd of 64 July 9th of 65. Well, you could swing a little bit there, maybe late July of 64 into July of 65, give or take a few days, a week or two. But regardless, we know 36,000 again is towards the tail end of the production. Let's get into the meat and potatoes. So again, this literally just sold. You saw that happen here on the Lincoln Addict channel. And what we want to really kind of dive into is when we look at this car, we see how beautiful it is, at least from the photos that we can see. We do notice that it has a passenger mirror. These were not a factory option. However, keep in mind, a lot of folks, there are companies that make these that look very nice and they install these on their cars. And I do not think it looks bad whatsoever. It is easier to drive with a passenger mirror, but I do want to kind of call that out. 15-inch steel wheels with polished covers. They go into a lot of detail about a lot of different things. The main thing here that you want to look at is the California clean title. During refurbishment, the body was refinished in black, so it indicates again that there has been some sort of restoration. Rust on the underside of the trunk lid was repaired. I've talked about that. It doesn't really matter what climate the car was in, they will tend to rust underneath those deck lids. And a lot of that has to do with the adhesive that was used between the deck lid and the skeleton underneath. Now, I have seen, and I have a car that I own that's a California car, that it didn't look as bad when it was out west. And then you kind of get to Florida and you go, wow, with the humidity, if you're not climate controlled, things like that, they will tend to eat away a little bit at the not only the deck lid, but also the. So it's good that they fixed that, is what I'm getting at. The ride was a refreshed suspension. They kind of go into some good details here, including the size and the tire. So that's really good because a lot of folks, if you're going to have a car like this, you're going to want to have that thinner white wall. More than likely, you're going to be going for that factory look. And I tell you what, from everything I can see with this car, it's amazing. The seating surfaces were reupholstered in Hillshire creamsicle leather over replacement foam. So the color might not be 100% Palomino, but that's the feeling that you kind of get. That's what Bring a Trailer has listed. They talk about all of the other things that were redone. The refrigerant was converted to the 134A refrigerant. That's key. I've done that in my 65. A lot of times, the folks that have put hands on these cars, like Blair and Teresa, they tend to lean towards wanting to do a new condenser that is makes it a little bit more efficient, my understanding, for that type of refrigerant. But either way, to have working AC, so often you're going to hear people say, hey, the AC doesn't work. It probably just needs to be recharged. Well, why don't you just recharge it then? The bottom line is the AC works from what we can tell here, and that's great. We can see here it has the individual adjustable contour seats, also known as bucket seats. Very rare, of course, available first in 64. You'll see cars with them, but not as much. We can also see that it has the tilt column, and it's looking great from here. The engine bay looks fantastic. We can see that they did leave a single reservoir. Now, I'm a big proponent of going to the dual reservoir, but I will say if you've got a car of this prestige, I could see why somebody goes, you know what, I'm going to leave a single reservoir. Now, I wouldn't, but I can see why someone wanted to do that. I get it. We can also see that the factory style, more than likely this has been obviously replaced, but the insulation, if you will, is around these fuel lines. Okay, that's a key thing. We can see that it has the 3-port fuel pump. We can see that it has the, more than likely, this is a what they call a battery topper. You can buy these on eBay. I think they come from a different country, not in the US. They take a while to ship, but this gives you the look and feel of those quote old style Autolite, I think they were, batteries. So that's definitely a nice touch. You'll see that on some nice cars such as this. Everything else from what we can see here looks good. I do believe this here is the cruise control. They talk about all the different stuff in terms of new air conditioning compressor hoses were also fitted. We've got an underneath photo that looks fantastic. The exhaust looks really good. We can see that it was detailed underneath, and it looks like it has been at some point painted black. But I will tell you, although that sometimes is an indicator of things that are being covered up, from what I can see on this car, it's very, very nice. And this is what you would want if you have the money to be able to afford a car like this. This is something that's been done really, really well. They did overhaul the automatic transmission, which is great because, again, depending on where you live in the US, you might have a hard time finding people that want to work on an older trans like this. We've got the VIN plate, the number plate, if you will, that we kind of went through there. And we can see the MEL, which is the Mercury Edsel Lincoln 430. We can see here that it was rebuilt. I have a rebuilt engine in my 64, and often they don't even need to be rebuilt, but by the time you take them out and they're just caked in oil, you just get a nice clean finish. The block is hot tanked often. Typically they're going to bore them out just a little bit so it'll come out to 30 over, and you just end up with a fresh engine, and this engine could last to the end of time. It's just fantastic. There are some walk around videos. I'm not going to click on the videos right now, but what I want to reinforce is these cold start videos are fantastic. When someone could put their hand on the header, aka manifold, and touch it, those typically get super, super hot. So this is fantastic, showing the cold start. There's a driving video, which we can see here. It does have the cruise control. I will see if this pulls up here. See if I can just scan through this really quick to show you guys. Right here, this switch, and it does change throughout the years, but this is the cruise control. It's a little bit bigger of a setup. Of course, it's to the right of the steering wheel. It's not unsightly, but it's definitely kind of a rare thing. What we can also see here is that not only does it have air conditioning, which we've established, it has the Ultronic Eye, which is the automatic headlight dimmer. It has the AM FM, which we can tell here. It's got the little deal in the middle that flips from AM to FM. I'll talk more about that in the future, but these press in and they actually flip over, and you can save your AM and FM as well. I have one of those in my car. We have the cruise control. We can see that it has tilt column here because we've got the button at the end of the lever, the shift lever, but you also see the indicator here for the different number conventions, if you will, because you can move the column up and down, which is a very, very nice feature. And of course, we established that it has air condition. This is a car that if you had been, and again, this is why I wish I had a little bit more time right now. I would have loved to go over this before, because I think sometimes people are looking for cars and they're not following them as closely as I am. But I will tell you, this is the type of car you want to get if you have the funds. Now, some of you are going to go, wow, I'm looking in the 30, 40, $50,000 range. Harder to find in that range, definitely possible. Chris at Lincoln Land right now is selling 62 or 63, an original style convertible that he drives all over this area. I think he's under 30K for it. And sometimes I go, wow, Chris, you could sell those for a lot more. He puts very, very fair prices. Lincoln Land Inc. Of course, you can give them a call. You can Google them. Known Chris a long time now, and he's a great guy. But a car like this, it has so much already done. And some people will sometimes, make comments like, wow, how could someone spend 150 grand on this? I'm telling you, if you buy a car for 70 and you go, man, I really want to dial it in, and you get the specialists to work on it to get it to this level, it's going to cost you $50,000, $60,000 easily. You start looking at the part cost and things like that. Now, you could argue, hey, I do all the stuff myself, I'm an expert with this stuff. Then hey, you're ahead of the game. Okay, then you're probably not even watching this podcast or this YouTube channel, if you will. But I could tell you, to me, black 65 is very desirable. When I just look at the colors, you see that clear back window, you see that nice top, you look at the interior color. To me, it is just elegant. It is super nice. To me, this is a car that I hope that someone purchases, and that, to me, this should not become a resto mod. I love resto mods, I own one, but this is a car that's like too nice. This is one that you cruise, you enjoy. It's kind of an investment. I do think this car will go up in value. One thing to call out is right here, John Cashman has reinforced this to the community for many years. In 66, Lincoln fixes this, but there should be a bar installed here, okay? It's not factory, I get it, and I see why someone would go, well, I want to keep this more factory correct. I have a video on my channel. There's different resources out there. You could spend about $15 at Home Depot. You can get a square or round tube. You could spray paint it black, and you want to put it over this, call it knuckle rivet, if you will, and you want to put it over here. It's easy to install. That's something that you want to do. The reason being is, over time, these cast pieces can crack. It doesn't matter how nice of a car that it is. We've seen it happen. And certainly, if you start cracking any of these cast pieces, it gets expensive. And depending on where you live, you're going to run into challenges on having anyone want to work on it. What I can see is the window, or excuse me, the moldings here do look really, really good. It's hard to tell which ones they are. I only recommend steel rubber. We'll have to see if in the receipts it indicates. This is as nice of a trunk that I've seen. Super nice. You've got that original color. You've got the deals here. These are very getting harder to find. A lot of people discard these, the covers, if you will. We can see underneath the deck lid, it just looks stunning. Want to look at a few more photos here. This is probably, I don't believe this was the material, so someone probably cut this. This looks fantastic. This is kind of, normally there's a curtain, if you will, or a piece of like a particle board type piece here that will cover all the relays. This looks really, really, really nice. You can just see how nice everything is in here. Here are the locks so that these spin whenever the deck lid goes down and it grabs them and then it locks it in place, which is great. But I mean, you don't see any residue. You don't see any nastiness. It just looks great. Oh, by the way, look at the spare tire. Wow, looks fantastic. It's painted. The wheel is rather, and you can just see how nice the jack looks and everything looks there. Going through this kind of quick, but I'm just trying to kind of keep things moving. I think you guys will appreciate that. We can see here. Now, I do know factory-wise, Chris at Lincoln Land has reinforced this. I had this on both of my cars. There is a piece of molding that goes here, I think all the way to 67. And all it is kind of like a door molding. It's the black rubber. That typically will go there. I'm not pointing out the fact that it's not there. I guess I kind of am. But that would be one piece that would normally be there. And all it did was kind of help ensure that you didn't, run your finger across a potential little rough edge there, if you will. It reminds me of like a pinch molding on the bottom of where your rocker panel is at. But again, that's very, very, very nitpicky. We can see it does have the locking gas cap, which I think is a rotunda item. This was an item that you could purchase from like the Ford accessory division slash the dealership, and that was in the books and whatnot. There are a ton of photos, and as you can see, I'm going through these pretty quick. Something I would reinforce to everyone is, you're going to see a couple maybe minor imperfections. My car is like this too, where things don't 100% line up like this, but this is a very close up photo. And I think those things are okay. If you really want to take the time, you can dial those in. We can see there's no pitting on the cages for these 65 tail lenses. They look fantastic. The windows, that I do like these photos showing the windows up, not just down. And we can see again the exhaust and how nice everything looks. Without a license plate on it, you can see how nice it looks even behind where the license plate would go. There's videos, or excuse me, photos rather, underneath the doors, which I think is important. Seeing all this stuff kind of shows you the level of detail, especially when these items aren't all painted. So often shops are quick. They're working on tight timelines and they just want to blow all this in with paint. That's not what was done here. It reinforces how nice this car is. I don't know what this is hanging, but I can tell you it does look like it has the original floor mats, which is fantastic, and they match the interior, and I think they look great. You look at the sill plates and you look at how nice everything is. It's just a beautiful car. I love looking at the dashes on these. This appears to be a tissue dispenser. Believe it or not, you'll see these more in the C word, the Cadillac vehicles. But from my recollection in my literature, there was a tissue dispenser available on these Lincolns. And again, with the other features we've already talked about, it wouldn't surprise me if that was available or if that's what they ended up, having for this car. We can see there again the center console, which is specific to the bucket seat cars. The interior looks amazing. I think it has front and rear seat belts. If I remember correctly, seat belts in 65 were an option. This is also kind of a cool option. Some of the old school heads will probably remember. These were an accessory. I sometimes will see them on eBay. And if I remember correctly, these will allow for you to kind of roll up the seat belt in a certain way so that they're not just laying on the seat. That's really cool to see. We could see the dash looks really, really nice. Again, the electronic eye, which is the automatic headlight dimmer. Yes, that technology was available in that era. This is what my friend Tony and I call a unicorn part, where it says ignition. Often these rings, if you will, are missing or broken or tough to read. Not a big deal, but showing that it's there, I mean, it shows the completeness of this car. Oftentimes when this lower dash had to be removed to do certain work on the vehicles, these pieces were broken or discarded, and it's so cool that it's actually there. We can see all of the detail that's dialed in here with the different stickers. There are reproduction folks that sell these, but it doesn't matter. In my book, it's there. We can also see these tower clamps. I'm not a huge fan of these, but if you're talking about era specific, that's what you want to have. We also know, and I've reinforced this in the past, that this is a California car, which we know that it is. We have the California emissions. So you have this extra piece that comes from the air cleaner over to the lid, if you will, the cap rather, of the oil filter deal. We can see underneath the hood, someone's replaced the insulation, which looks fantastic. You can see how nice and clean everything looks. It does have, of course, as you would expect with an AC car, it has the fan shroud, which looks amazing. This, I do not believe, and they may talk about this in the description, I do not believe this is factory. I've never seen this, but I could see where someone would take the time to take something that was era specific and put a light there. That's one thing that I wish existed in that era. I'm pretty confident that most of you guys are going to chime in to say that was added after the fact, but that's awesome in my book. You get a bunch of literature, which I think is fantastic. You get things like this, which are the paint codes. You have different things here, dealer invitation to VIP customers. I've never actually seen that. This data book is pretty rare. Those are getting definitely tough to find. You've got a couple of user or owner manuals. One's an NOS on the left, one's a new, and you've got some other things like this that I just have not seen, which I think is super cool. I do own one of these accessories and optional equipment. Here's the sales brochure, the speed control. I mean, the completeness of this car is just amazing. Okay, so I want to wrap this up. I rambled on a lot about this car, but I'm telling you, it is nice. I think personally, someone at 153K that can afford that got a heck of a deal. You look at the literature, you look at how nice this car is. To me, these cars will continue to go up in value, especially these original cars. Okay. This one's restored. I get it. The original style. Now, I will tell you, we have seen some amazing prices out of the resto mods. Okay. I don't think I can argue, and I think I've always said this, other than a Lincoln that's tied to JFK, rest in peace, or Jackie O, rest in peace, or something to that effect. The Pope, rest in peace. Well, the current Pope, but the old school popes and whatnot. You just don't get to a number that you would get to if you had a resto mod. $150,000 is a steal, in my opinion, on this car. It is super nice. Okay. No, that's not going to drive, every car to get 150,000. Larry Heibloom, I talked to him a little while ago. His car had more than 150 grand in it, and it didn't quite sell for that. Although the guy did resell it a year later. I think he made about 30,000, something like that, 35,000 on it. But as more of these cars are restored, or as more of these cars rather are customized, it's going to leave less and less and less that are in this type of condition. So I do believe they will continue to go up in value. What we don't know is, will the younger generation love these cars as much as we do right now? So the same thing, I'm looking at some of my old school BMX stuff up here. I just watched the video from my friend Sean at Rad BMX Builds earlier, and he talked about how much longer is this BMX craziness going to happen, right? All these part prices have jumped, and they're just insane. It's hard to afford like an 86 GT Performer or Pro Performer. I totally get it, but it also is the same in the muscle car world. It's the same in this Lincoln world. In 20 years, so let's say in 2045, where will we be as a world, as a country? Will the generation now that's 25, they're going to be 45 then, are they going to care about these cars? Will the values plummet because everyone's like, no, we got to have a car that we could pour water in and drive, or solar cars or whatever the hell's going on then? Only time will tell. Will these cars end up in museums? Who knows? Thank you for the support. I appreciate you. If you watch to the end, leave an emoji. How about a thumbs up emoji? I appreciate you guys. Take care. ODB, we out here. I'm going to keep coming up with new content. Trust me. Peace.